I'm pretty sure that if a male Prime Minister were to seem similarly emotional while resigning from office, while resigning from the Prime Minister's office, I would immediately and reflexively feel warmth and sympathy towards them, just perhaps not quite as much. But she doesn't deserve it. Unless you can argue persuasively that she had little choice but to take every decision or make every move that she made. And I don't think you would do that. The strangest thing, perhaps, about this latest chapter in the deliberate and self-inflicted diminishment of our nation is, of course, that the people who essentially applauded her and cheered her to the rafters for her early rhetoric are precisely the same people that have administered the harshest judgments and the meanest assessments subsequently. It was a deal with the devil, wasn't it? It was riding a tiger. She employed the language of UKIP. She talked about the will of the people. She talked about taking back control of our money, our laws and our borders. And again, no journalist ever said, what do you mean by the word control? What money are you talking about? What laws? What borders can you control in a way that would somehow allow you to compel people to come here when you'd created an environment, in her words, a hostile environment, that you didn't want them to come here? It's quite bizarre. I think she has been preternaturally appalling as a Prime Minister. And I make no apology for this, it's my mum's fault. When I see a woman of her age coming close to tears in public, something inside me melts. I just have to today refreeze it. And I will make one observation before we move to your calls. And that observation is this. I'm talking about my visceral response to the tears of somebody I consider to have been the second worst Prime Minister in living memory. And yet, if we were to look at this story through the lens of Brexit, you'll remember that much of the post-referendum debate focused upon the delight that Leave voters took in the metaphorical tears of people who wanted to remain. And I think there's a personality difference at the heart of all of this. I can describe Theresa May in the most negative of terms. I can provide all the evidence you could possibly need to conclude that she's been an absolute disaster. But I also feel very sorry for her this morning, and I know that I shouldn't. That's just me being honest. On the other side of the Brexit referendum, there were an awful lot of people, and by no means all of them, who revelled in the unhappiness and the misfortune of their opponents and their foes. And that is the bridge we can't build. How can you build a bridge between people who consider a politician to be absolutely atrocious, but on a human level feel sympathy for the situation they found themselves in? How can you reconcile that worldview with the worldview of the "you lost, get over it" brigade? We've all lost. Just 30-something% of the country is still in denial. The sort of attempt to make sense of what's happened in a way that doesn't actually insult anybody is one that I haven't been entirely successful with over the last 3 years. There may even have been mornings where I've rather revelled in insulting people. But we are where we are. People claiming that WTO terms are preferable to what we have now, or in some way represent the sunlit uplands and the unicorns for all that we were promised during the campaign, without A, being able to explain what WTO terms are, or B, explain why not a single country on the planet has elected to do what we are now being told our next Prime Minister should do. So here is my analogy. I've probably shared this one with you already, but this is, I think, the best one, because I hope that this at least accounts for behaviour that some of us find impossible. And you need to understand the last 30 years of British media. This is the problem. This is why younger voters are genuinely befuddled and baffled by Brexit and by everything that's gone on, because they haven't been raised in an atmosphere of absolute enmity. And it wasn't even that sincere, you know, it was vaguely comical. Who could ever have thought, when Boris Johnson started writing about bendy bananas in Brussels, who could ever have thought that that would turn out to be of immense political significance? But it was, because what it incubated very slowly since 1975, presumably, but I don't think that the sort of weapons grade nonsense kicked in until the 80s when Johnson arrived in Brussels as the Daily Telegraph's correspondent shortly after being fired from the Times for making up quotes from his own Godfather. I'll say that again. Shortly after being fired from the Times for making up quotes from his own Godfather. That's when things went really nuts and all of these stories started filtering back. And, of course, they turned out to be circulation gold. They turned out to be really popular, as Johnson has said himself. He couldn't quite believe. He used an analogy of a greenhouse. And he said, I couldn't quite believe how much joy there was in the sound as I would lob these bricks over the wall from Brussels and sit back and listen to the sound of greenhouse glass shattering on the other side of the wall. It was a brilliant bit of careerism, a brilliant bit of self-promotion. He created an entire genre of what we could loosely describe as journalistic Euroscepticism, culminating in stories, and you think I'm making this up, but I'm not, it's all checkable, culminating in stories about how the European Union was going to ban rocking horses, or ban certain flavours of crisp, or ban cisterns that fill up quickly in your lavatory, and ban this and ban that. So, you know, it was funny at first when we take caller after caller after caller on this programme, and you'd say, so what is it that they've done to you that you're so cross about? And they'd talk about, one bloke thought that the EU was going to abolish the 3-pin plug in the United Kingdom. That was relatively recent. Plenty of people have spoken about bananas. There's, of course, a well-established confusion about what the European Court of Justice, the European Court of Human Rights and the European Parliament represent, and where their responsibilities and authorities intersect. But that is the bottom line here. The problem is that however persuasive and compelling your explanation of this slow process of weaponisation of European Union membership is, however evidence-based and however inarguable it is, you very, very rarely meet anyone who says, oh, crikey, you mean it was all nonsense? Oh, well, in that case, I've got things completely wrong, because it gets coupled with a notion of nationalism or, to be less controversial, national interest. So not only do you portray an institution of which we are actually members as being deliberately agitating against our interests, you can't come up with anything really powerful or meaningful in the context of that narrative, so you end up talking about bananas and 3-pin plugs and crisp flavours and rocking horses and toilet cisterns. But it works, you see, because not only are you portraying them as agitating against our interests, utterly dishonestly, but you're also, of course, feeding the fire of what Dr. Johnson was referring to when he described patriotism as the last refuge of a scoundrel, that bogus patriotism, which is defined entirely by what you hate and what you reject and what you despise, as opposed to what you love and what you honour and what you respect. So you can't look at the last 30 years of British politics and British journalism and be remotely surprised by how or where we've ended up, because the country is still full of people who think that the European Union is the Fourth Reich, or that it's a vehicle of German oppression. They have no evidence whatsoever to back this up, but posh people have said it on the telly. Doff cap, tug forelock, can't be wrong. Posh people have said it on the telly, and it has been full. It's been in every single newspaper for all of my adult life. So it's wrong, and it is a bit condescending to turn to these people with a sense of frustration and anger and bewilderment, because so much effort and money has gone into persuading the country that A, the European Union is actually our enemy, dedicated to harming and hurting us while we are still in it. Odd but true. And B, it kind of plays into that mentality, that slightly warped mentality that feels like victims. When patriotism and victimhood collide, things get very, very, very ugly. So you can't point at anything they've done that proves that they make our laws or control our money or control our board. You can't point at anything like that, but it doesn't matter, because somebody walked into the room in which we were all sitting, and they walked into the room and they shouted fire. 52% of the people in the room stampeded for the exit. 48% of the people in the room just checked to see if there was a fire. And there wasn't. But that doesn't make the 52% people stupid, you see. They could have been the only ones to survive if there had actually been a fire. But there wasn't. What's happened subsequently is that a significant proportion of the 52% and almost all of their Pied Pipers have claimed that there was a fire, that there still is a fire. You just can't see it yet. Or it goes to a different school. Or it's a fire, but it's invisible. There's no shame or embarrassment or guilt attached to running for the door when somebody shouts fire. But there's a reason why it is illegal to do it in a room when there is no fire. It's one of the most famous of restrictions upon freedom of speech. You're not allowed to stand up in a crowded room and shout fire because the stampede for the door could cause chaos and potentially carnage. So that's what happened in June of 2016. After 30 years of hearing people scream fire, 52% of the country elected to peg it for the fire exit. They've now come through the other side of that fire exit, effectively, with the referendum result, and they have to dedicate the rest of their careers to pretending that they didn't run for the fire exit because someone shouted fire. They ran for the fire exit because they genuinely believe that standing outside in the car park is far preferable to being in the actual cinema or the theatre. And that's what all these arguments are now. So when people talk about WTO terms, as we've demonstrated this morning, they are trying to persuade themselves and others that they consciously and deliberately voted to be outside in the car park in their undercrackers instead of tucked up nicely in their hotel. And that's an astonishing effort that it's going to take over the coming years, because one thing is for certain, there was never any fire. There was never any threat to our rocking horses and our crisp flavours and our toilet systems and our 3-pin plugs. And the things that were legislated for were things that were for the benefit of everybody in Europe. Things like environmentally damaging light bulbs, or can you imagine how we would look to a wartime generation? So why have you voted to unpick Winston Churchill's dream of a unified Europe? Oh, because I read something about Hoovers in the Daily Express. Sir, pardon? You read something about Hoovers in the Daily Express, and that's why you voted to unpick Winston Churchill's dream of a united Europe.
Thank goodness. About time. I stood up at the Welsh Conservative Conference and asked her why she hadn't resigned.
Oh, I remember that.
There were people there that I've been talking to prior to me doing that, and they were filled with fury.
What about?
What about? About the fact that she hadn't taken us out.
How could she have done that?
How could she have done that? Quite simple.
Go on.
WTO, that's it. Bye. Let's go.
Right, I see. So there was never any reality in your mind when we were conducting the referendum campaign and talking about negotiating agreements and negotiating deals. What was that not true, or was that just theatre?
We negotiated, and as we've seen on that television programme, they were taking the mick out of it all the time.
Well, I know the television programme you referred to, but that was filmed long after. They were laughing at the incompetence of our team because they kept saying
whatever.
Well, no, it's not whatever. This is really important. The thing that they found impossible to believe was that Theresa May was turning up in Brussels asking for things that they'd made perfectly clear that were never going to be on the table. So once you admit that, then all of the referendum campaign gets filed under either mistaken or dishonest, and the only way you can cling to the notion that leaving is a good idea is by saying that we leave on WTO terms.
Leave on WTO terms.
So which country at the moment do you see as the guiding light? Because many of us are slightly unnerved by the idea of WTO terms. So what's the country doing what you think she should have done to Britain?
Okay, as far as I can make out, we already deal on lots of countries on WTO terms. It's nothing new.
So which is the country that...
let me finish.
No, I can't let you finish because you've misunderstood my question. What country currently has no free trade agreements with anybody else in the world?
Idea.
But that's what you want for Britain?
Yeah, yes I do.
So what are you looking at as the example that you're keen to follow?
Well, all you're doing is doing what a lot of the media do, which is just keep on interrupting me and interrupting me and interrupting me.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you questions. Yes, exactly. So what country currently trades internationally in the way that you want the United Kingdom?
I've already answered that question next.
So what was your answer?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head. I mean...
Okay, so your grounds for wanting to be like that let's pretend there is a country in that situation. Your grounds for wanting to be like them are what, Stuart?
Listen, all we want to do is people like me, all we want to do is stop being told what to do.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate you think I'm interrupting you again. But
sure, I know.
But the question is really simple.
Doing stuff like this.
The question,
let me have my say.
Of course I will. You carry on.
Yeah, well, okay. All I'm saying is people like me are fed up with people in the EU telling us what to do. I used to be a county councillor, in Denbighshire, yes. And I was involved in so-called European money, and all it was a slush fund that we give money to them, they take 10% off, they give some to the Welsh European Funding Office, which take another 10% off, then they give some to the County Council, which take another 10% off, and at the bottom line, we've got a little bit left to hand out as some sweeties to the general public. That's how it works. And
do you have an example of that?
Yeah.
Go on.
It was called Cantata.
Go on.
County Council had 1.5 million given to it by, in inverted commas, the European Union, but it wasn't given to it. The UK gave money to the European Union. They take their bit off. They hand it out to us like sweeties.
Well, it's not.
No, let me finish.
I was just asking you to clarify. I've got no beef with anything that you've just said.
Right,
but now we'll go back to the question I asked you, if we can. This notional country with no trade agreements that you think we should be like.
Well, no, you see, you're doing it again.
What am I doing? Okay, no, you're right. You finish your story. You carry on.
Okay, thank you. So that money we give the money to Europe, comes back to the Welsh European Funding Office. They take some off for their. Europe takes 10% off. Then the Welsh Funding Office takes 10% off. Then Denbighshire County Council have it. We've got a load of officers being employed to distribute this money, and at the end of it, we get some sweeties at the end.
Yes, I heard you the first time.
I was involved in that.
Okay,
do you know what? We went to Ireland.
I'm no clearer on what you think you're saying, Stuart. I appreciate you think that I'm interrupting you now, but I'm just trying to get a little bit of clarity on the thing you think Theresa May should have done. She should have taken us straight out with no deal and no agreement. You can't think of a country in that situation currently, and I completely respect that. I apologise for interrupting you and asking if you did know any countries in that situation, but your grounds for thinking that we will be better off as a nation or a population is based upon a theoretical country that has no trade agreements with anyone else in the world. I just want you to give me a little bit more detail on where you derive your confidence that that will be preferable to the situation we're currently in, with a supplementary question about why, if it's so attractive, is there not a single country on the planet that's elected to do that?
Okay. Go back to what I said.
No, please. I want you to say something new now.
Right, all right, I'll say something new.
Good.
Theresa May, I agree. Go out there. Let's have a deal. So you sit down, you talk to them.
No, WTO terms means that there's no deal. So I can't do this all day. I have to just ask you again.
Okay.
Have you thought of a country yet that has no trade?
Question. I'm trying to.
No, you're not. You're not answering my question, Stuart. I'm sorry that I haven't been clear enough. I'll try again. The country that has no trade agreements that you can't think of, which is fine because it's a high-pressured situation when you ring a radio station. Let's pretend there is one, which there isn't. Where do you derive your confidence that that country's trading arrangements are superior to what we currently have?
If Theresa May had gone in there negotiating properly,
yes,
we could have used the argument that we will go out on WTA, and if she'd been a bit more forceful instead of letting Ollie Robbins do what he did, and we know that that's true because
that's not what I asked you, Stuart, at all. I do apologise. Just for the final time, the country that is, if you like, the exemplar that you wish to follow, you think we should have gone out on. No. Because what you've said in the space of the space of this conversation, Stuart, on the one hand, you've said we should definitely have left on WTO terms, and then you said in the same breath that we should have threatened to leave on WTO terms, and that would have made them do our bidding. Do you see why they can't both be true?
You finally understood what I said.
Oh, good. So we should definitely have left on WTO terms, but we should also have threatened to do it to get them to give us an agreement.
Properly.
Yes, okay. No, I'm glad we got some clarity in the end, and I'm glad we agree. She should have left on WTO terms, and she also shouldn't have left on WTO terms, but should have threatened to do so. And before you go, Stuart, have you thought of a country yet that has no trading agreements with anyone else in the world?
Have you?
Yes, there aren't any.
Really?
Yes. I can't believe you didn't know that.
You're on the record as saying there are no...
I can't believe you didn't know that when you stood up at the Conservative Party conference and called for us to be like that.
Well, at least I did something, didn't I?
Yes, you made an absolute cretin of yourself in public for the first time. And now, congratulations, you've done it again.
incredibly difficult job, James, and I think she did it badly. But I think she tried to do what was right for the country, but she failed because she realised the need for compromise was too late. And so I think history will be kinder to her. But you're right, those fanatics, those people who plotted a downfall for their personal ambitions, the people who want to cut off all our ties to Europe, they're in the ascendant now. And though I think history won't be kind to them, I think we're on the cusp of having a very hard-right ideological Tory party leadership that will make it harder for us to bring the country back together.
You say ideological. If Boris Johnson, as the bookies predict, gets the top job, it would be the ideology of opportunism, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't think he's. I mean, Johnson is an unusual character in that he isn't really rooted in any tradition, and he is undoubtedly the most self-interested politician standing for the leadership of the Tory party. But he's also an able communicator and a strong campaigner, and that's why I think there sort of seems to be coalescing around it. But he will be captured. I mean, he will only be Tory party leader with the support of Jacob Rees-Mogg, with the tacit support of Nigel Farage, with the group of MPs for whom Brexit is not a complex negotiation but some kind of religious experience, and he's going to find it very difficult to release himself from their ownership of his leadership, and that's why I think it's so dangerous.
For a party of government to be crippled by internecine warfare and poised upon the brink of a fairly bloody civil war, historically would offer a great opportunity for the party of opposition. But if we can make any predictions about the results of these European elections, it's going to be a question of how profound a kicking both main parties have taken. Why hasn't Labour capitalised on Conservative chaos?
Well, you'll have seen the tensions in all the parties, James. There's a lot of pressure that is sort of testing party bonds. I mean, I want a little bit more time to look at the turnout figures and analyse the results before I draw some hard conclusions on this. But it does seem to me that already looking at the sort of emerging trend of turnout, the areas that voted Remain in 2016 seem to have turned out more than the areas that voted Brexit.
Not for your lot, though, Tom.
Well, it might not be for my party, James, but it is or it might not be for these results, but it might be a wake-up call for my party that means we've got to have to look at them. But I don't want to conclude anything until I see those figures.
Fair enough. Finally, then, a lot of people suggesting a general election becomes more likely, possibly even inevitable, once the Conservative leadership election is out of the way. Are you confident that Jeremy Corbyn will be leading the Labour Party into that general election if and when it occurs?
I'm sure. Look, we've been calling for a general election for months. I really don't know. I mean, I don't think whoever the next Tory leader is knows if there's going to be a general election yet, and it's going to be in their hands. But you're right, parliamentary arithmetic means it might happen. And if it comes early, then Jeremy will definitely be taking us into that election. How
come? Nightmare in the locals, potential nightmare on the horizon in the Euros, and no noises about finding a new leader of the party of opposition?
Well, he's a democratically elected leader of our party. He's been there twice. We'll be looking for him to map out an electorally credible strategy. I've got some ideas on that, and we'll be talking about them in the weeks and months ahead. And obviously he's going to have to take on board what voters are telling us in the local elections and whatever the European elections show on Sunday evening.